All right, hi everyone. Just wanted to give you a quick heads up on our third assignment. Our third assignment doesn't really have a description, and what you'll turn into me is just your actual edited documents. Remember, we are editing academic essays for the College of Education. These students, the authors of these papers, are working on their doctorate typically, maybe their master's, but probably their doctorate. Um, and they are typically principals, high school teachers, and other people that have an advanced career in education and are working on more credentials in graduate school. They're generally smart people. You see on the screen in front of you right now a finished one from a few years ago. Um, right here, so you can see what we're looking at. It usually what they do is this one's pretty short. They've gotten longer some years. Um, we'll look at what you have. Sometimes we have a bunch of short ones to edit. Sometimes we'll have some long ones, and your group will just tackle a couple of longer ones, far longer than this. That might be like 7 or 8 pages. We'll wait and see what we get from the College of Ed, and then we'll have a talk. But they all cycle around the other video that you'll watch after this one, and need a variety of editing techniques that we'll be working on this coming week. But all this is to say, what do I want you to practice long term, but also immediately on the ADA compliance document that you'll practice for Monday? Know that you're going to make something eventually. You'll be editing to help them make something that looks like this. They need a topic or a research question, as I discussed in class. Oftentimes, they're asked to write these short paragraphs, like this is like 1 week of homework because they've got all these sources to read and they boil it down into like one paragraph for homework. And then they wind up putting them together as an essay, which seems like a nice idea and is. Um, but it makes them seem really, really separated from each other. So one thing that the professor of this class wants is he wants them to try to integrate better all of these ideas, basically to have a thesis that seems to last. Or if we're thinking something very simple, like a meal paragraph, main idea, evidence, analysis, link to thesis. We want these paragraphs to link back to a constant thesis. You'll find oftentimes they end in a spot that kind of proves their point, but then how does this relate back to stuff back here? How are these paragraphs linked to each other? Right. And so that becomes the issue. You can even look at the topic sentences and you could say, like, does this topic sentence, does it reference anything in the last sentence? Or are these all just, as I like to say, they're all on the same topic, but they're not answering the same research question? It's really easy to just grab, if this one is about Native American doctoral journeys, you could grab all the facts in the world and dump them in here, and they'd all seem to be on topic. But some of those facts probably wouldn't answer an implied question that this essay is asking. And then you'd want to get rid of the facts that don't belong there. So one thing you have to master as a student in this editing unit is, what is their thesis or their research question? And have they dumped in facts that simply don't belong to that question? They're on topic in a very, very general way. They're about something about Native American journeys, but they don't really cut to the heart of what this essay seems to be about. Sometimes these students don't really even understand that they have a topic but no research question. Your job as an editor is to explain that to them and to give them varying interpretations of what their essay might be about. They, even though they're smart people, kind of dumped a bunch of facts and sources and claims and study results together into paragraphs, but maybe they're not totally sure what it is either. So sometimes that is your job as their editor, is to say, like, I think what you're trying to get at is this. I think the question you're trying to answer is this. Um, so there's your heads up. Even highly intelligent people working on advanced education can get lost in the weeds on all these details. What I want to do now is show you what your comments may look like. And this is what we're shooting for long term when you get your essays, but also it's what your comments will look like ultimately just for your practicing for homework for Monday. Let's take a look. All right, here we go. One of the main things I want you to practice are short comments that still give maximum feedback and direction. Um, this is what last year's papers. So this is what students actually write. You'll wind up doing this. You're going to edit papers individually as homework. And then in class, you share your comments and say, like, I said this, what did you say? What direction did you want to push them? What did you see? And we double check our insights individually on each essay against each other's. And then each person kind of takes responsibility for ultimately typing up the comments for one essay. So here's one group. So I'm not going to take you through all of them, but what I want you to see are two things. A, that most comments are decently short, but B, they really, really give some highly specific direction. They highlight what they see as the specific problem and point them toward what they believe could be a solution. So let's just take a look at some. Here's a great one. This title is really broad. Is there a specific way you could to make it way specific to the topic? Eventually, for your homework for the papers, you'll have one sort of mega comment at the beginning. Everybody does that. There's always sort of like a, hey, here's what's going well, and here are some patterns that we found throughout the paper. So you'll have this large comment here, but still notice how specific it is, both in terms of the content and how to restructure the content, the ideas, how they connect to each other, but also maybe what we could call the writing rhetoric or the structure as well. And they've got some on that as well. And you're kind of handling both here, content and the writing. Their content may be good, but poorly organized. Sometimes their content isn't good. And you as a reader are like, I'm not really sure what this idea means, or how you got to define this. I don't know what you're talking about. And those are idea-based things. If we look at just more comments, some of them are grammar-based, and it's not your job to go in and fix it. Instead, what we do is we give the briefest instruction. But here's one based on sort of making a choice on what to do. Which of these is the thesis? It seems like the first sentence might be a better thesis, right? Because they seem to have two. Maybe we can't tell which one is more important. Maybe they need to boost one of the sentences. Say like, this paper will argue that, or most importantly, or my interpretation is, but they maybe need some, we call meta language or signposting, marking this. And that's kind of what this group is getting at. But notice how they hinted at that very, very quickly, right? So again, we've got some grammatical stuff. You don't change it. You just give them the suggestion. I know sometimes it might be faster to change it, but this professor that we're working for here and these students we're working for need to change their own work. We are just making suggestions. Notice there's some good feedback here too, which is always nice to hear. We don't want to overload them with good feedback. We can kind of do that up front. Mainly, you want to get to the productive stuff. Here we get at what the paragraph is talking about, but how maybe it's disorganized. They just didn't say shift this paragraph. They said, here's what it's about. Here's why maybe it's off track from the other surrounding topics. And they name those topics and probably suggest a different place in the paper where it could be, where it'd be a better fit. All that happening pretty quick, right? So you've really got to get their vocab in here. You've got to understand the whole paper and what it's doing. So you can suggest that this shift here could be shifted to later content. So they're not making comments as they go. You've got to sit down, read the whole paper, see what it's about, and then go back and start doing your editing, right? So you can see there's a back and forth between here. Here too, this is like, and I'll teach you all this as we go. This is a multiple week process, but giving your feedback as a reader, I thought you were going to say this, and then it said this. I'm very confused. I don't know what you mean by that. Why did you bring this up? I'm not sure what I'm supposed to learn here, right? But notice how specific it is as they go through. So we get the ideas. Let's take a look at one more real quick, and then I'm going to let you go. I don't want this video to go on forever, but I want to give you a sense of what we're working. All right, we'll just take a look at one more here that's doing the same thing. Well, here's one from last year. Very, very different type of paper, different group. Notice how they're pointing out right away, hey, here's some important language you use, kind of like old new information we've talked about, helping them establish their important vocabulary for the thesis that they should use throughout the paper. This author didn't do that. And so you're helping them with their readability, their textual coherence, right? Enough old information repeated, right? And noticing they're just pointing that out as they go. Some work with citations here. A lot of times what they'll do is they will cite, but they'll not explain it fully. We'll talk about that more in class. And so if you're lost as a reader and what you're supposed to learn, then you got to tell them, right? Here's another one that's just kind of dealing with a run-on sentence. You just got to tell them it's a run-on, but then notice there's a second thing inside of this, helping them clarify their thesis, but that the thesis, again, isn't quite as clear as it probably should be to the reader, suggesting they mark that in some way. Asking for examples. Now, again, they may not do all of these things, but it's what you think is best in this paper needs, right? And so there's pointing out citation issues, they're pointing out issues of examples or evidence. These are all things that an editor will do in academic editing, right? And again, notice that whatever you see, and these are the type of things you see, the comments have to remain pretty short. You're giving them suggestions without going into great details, all right? So you still have to have good vision as an editor in both the content and the structure of the piece, but also be really, really good at efficiently making suggestions. All right, and we'll leave it at that. That's enough of an intro into what we're going to be working on here. Those are the skill sets to take away. This is the type of thing you'll be working on and what yours will ultimately look like as you're done. All right, we'll leave off right there, everybody. You've got the other video now to start to take you into some of the specific rhetorical moves that are common in academic writing and ways to help judge the connections of information over time in an essay. All right, thanks all, and we will see you soon.